Welcome to this explainer. If you're a heavy user of the OpenAI Codex CLI, you already know the absolute power of having a lightweight coding agent right there living inside your terminal. But let's be honest, you probably also know the friction that comes with it. Because the moment you try to scale your workflow, your beautifully minimalist terminal suddenly feels, well, a bit like a traffic jam. So today, we're exploring AiMaMi. It's a tool engineered specifically to be the ultimate sidecar for the official OpenAI Codex CLI. It promises to smooth out all those rough edges, and the best part, it does it without replacing the terminal environment you already know and love. Okay, let's dive into this. Our journey today covers 5 parts. First, the Codex CLI friction. Second, the AiMaMi companion. Third, 3 pillars of power. Fourth, under the hood. And finally, setup and trade-offs. Section 1. The Codex CLI friction, terminal limitations. So to set the stage here, the OpenAI Codex CLI is brilliantly terminal first. But that same design comes with some real objective limitations when you push it hard. For starters, it handles exactly 1 account at a time. It completely hides your visual session history. And there is just no native way to pull third-party models into its selector. Now, if you're just writing a quick script, that's perfectly fine. But for teams running Codex heavily, this creates a massive bottleneck. I mean, you end up manually editing config files just to cycle through API accounts to dodge rate limits. You lose track of dozens of concurrent conversation threads spread across different projects. And if you want to route a specific task to, say, Claude or DeepSeek, you have to rely on clunky command line flags and constantly relaunch processes. The standard workarounds, they just don't scale. Section 2. The AiMaMi Companion, a native desktop app. Let's look at the actual solution. AiMaMi is built to close exactly the gaps we were just talking about. It's a native desktop application built on Tauri 2 for macOS and Windows. And the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that it's a true sidecar. It is not a fork of Codex, and it definitely isn't just some lazy web wrapper. It sits quietly alongside your Codex instance, extending the official client by managing all the surrounding infrastructure. The accounts, the threads, the models. And it does all this while letting you keep your hands right on the keyboard, in the terminal where you belong. Section 3. 3 pillars of power. AiMaMi core features. Now, what's really interesting about this is how it fundamentally changes your interaction with API limits. The first pillar we're looking at is multi-account rotation. AiMaMi can actually manage an unlimited number of Codex accounts. It tracks token health, flagging things like missing refresh tokens or transient failures, and it dynamically surfs between your accounts. So when one account runs low, it automatically identifies the account with the most remaining quota, allowing you to completely bypass manual reauthentication. It's pretty seamless. And it achieves this level of precision by tracking your quota across exactly 2 distinct time windows, a 5-hour window and a weekly window. Both of these are tracked as percentage progress bars with countdowns to their exact reset times, so you always know exactly where you stand. Let's walk through a practical day-in-the-life scenario to show exactly how much friction this removes. Imagine you're deep in a heavy refactoring session. Your primary pro account hits the 20% mark on its 5-hour quota window. Instantly, AiMaMi surfaces a notification offering to switch to your team account, which, let's say, still has 94% quota remaining. You simply confirm the switch, AiMaMi automatically restarts Codex with a new account injected, and your session just continues. No checking the OpenAI dashboard, no messing with environment variables, just uninterrupted focus. Moving on, the second pillar is session tree management. While the official Codex CLI does actually store your conversation threads locally on your disk, the terminal UI keeps them completely hidden. Well, AiMaMi brings them out into the light. It provides a structured, visual tree view of all your threads grouped logically by project. It's a huge step up for keeping your workspace organized in a way the terminal simply cannot do on its own. This setup gives you some serious session hygiene tools. We're talking collapsible parent and child branches, sorting options, and batch operations for deleting stale branches. You even get an analytics panel to track your token and session trends. But the real magic wand here is lost thread recovery. AiMaMi will actually scan your disk to rescue vanished threads. Though, keep in mind a small caveat here. You do have to completely close the Codex process during a restore to avoid any conflicts. So the crucial point is that AiMaMi doesn't just manage what's already there, it expands the entire ecosystem. The third pillar is intelligent model routing. This feature injects third-party models directly into the official Codex model menu. They literally just appear right alongside the official OpenAI models. You don't need manual configuration edits or CLI flags to spin up Anthropic or a locally hosted model anymore. To put that into perspective, this means you can seamlessly route a documentation-heavy task right over to Claude and then immediately switch back to Codex 1 for pure code generation. And you do all of this directly from within the native Codex terminal menu without ever breaking your workflow. It's a real game changer for speed. Section 4, Under the Hood, Architecture. For the developers watching, let's shift gears and look at the architectural reality making this all tick. And this brilliantly illustrates why AiMaMi feels so incredibly fast. The stack is thoroughly modern. It uses Tauri 2 for the application shell, which means it relies on the operating system's native web views, like WebKit on macOS and WebView 2 on Windows. Because it doesn't bundle a massive Chromium instance like a typical Electron app would, the binary size stays super lightweight. The front end is driven by React 18 and TypeScript. It's styled with Tailwind and Shadcan, while Rust comes in and handles all the heavy lifting down in the native layer. Section 5, Setup and Trade-offs, Prerequisites and Limits. Now, as impressive as all this sounds, we need to look objectively at the realities of adopting this tool into your daily grind. Building AiMaMi from source is robust for sure, but the setup? It is not trivial. You're going to need Node 18, PNPM 8, and Rust version 1.77 or higher. If you're on Windows, you absolutely must install the Microsoft C++ build tools and ensure WebView 2 is present. On macOS, you'll need Xcode installed. It does securely store your third-party API keys in the native OS keychain, which is fantastic for security, but prepare yourself for a major limitation here. AiMaMi targets macOS and Windows only. If you're running a Linux desktop or try to put this on a Linux server environment, right now, you are out of luck. Then there's the most significant trade-off you really have to consider, the licensing model. There's a fundamental split in how this application is distributed. On one side, utility features, things like MCP server management, skill packages, UI components, and the auto updaters, those are all unlocked in fully open source. But on the flip side, those three powerful pillars we just discussed, the account management, thread management, and the routing logic, those are locked down as proprietary private core modules. You cannot audit them, you can't fork them, and you cannot self-host them. Finally, let's move to how this builds out in terms of real-world reliability. When the API inevitably goes down, AiMaMi handles unreachable states by masking stale data and prompting you to configure a proxy. However, I should note that the documentation remains slightly vague on what exactly happens when both the primary and proxy connections enter a totally unreachable state. So it's a bit unclear if manual intervention is required to unblock the client in that worst-case scenario. Which brings us to the ultimate question you have to answer for yourself. For heavy users, AiMaMi clearly solves the absolute most painful friction points of the Codex CLI. But does the massive workflow boost of seamless multi-account rotation and visual session management actually outweigh the reality of relying on proprietary, closed-source routing logic to handle your sensitive API keys? You'll have to weigh your own team's compliance and security requirements against those undeniable productivity gains. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.